The calm one, the emotionally literate one, the one who somehow knows how to validate feelings, reframe negative thoughts, and gently suggest healthier boundaries even if your own life is slightly on fire. It sounds like a compliment, right? And sometimes it is. But if you're honest, you might also feel tired, maybe a little unseen. Maybe you've wondered, why does everyone feel so safe with me, but I don't always feel safe opening up to them? Let's talk about why this happens, not just socially, psychologically. Because being the therapist friend isn't random. It's not an accident. It's often rooted in your personality, your upbringing, and even the wiring of your nervous system. First, let's zoom out. In every social group, roles form naturally. There's the jokester, the planner, the chaotic one, the quiet observer, and yes, the emotional anchor. Humans are tribal by nature, and tribes need stability. They need someone who can absorb emotional storms without amplifying them. If you're the therapist friend, you probably developed a skill set early on, reading rooms, reading faces, sensing tension before anyone says a word. Maybe you grew up in a household where emotions were loud, unpredictable, or unspoken. Maybe you learned that staying calm kept things from escalating, or that being the mature one got you praise or safety. Psychologists sometimes talk about something called hyperattunement. It's when you become highly sensitive to other people's emotional states. Not just empathy, but almost a radar system. You walk into a room and instantly know who's upset, who's faking a smile, who's about to snap. Your brain got really good at this because, at some point, it had to. And here's the fascinating part. When you consistently respond to others with calm, validation, and insight, people start associating you with emotional relief. You become the safe harbor, the nervous system regulator. Research on co-regulation shows that humans unconsciously sync their emotional states with those around them. If you're steady, grounded, and reflective, others literally feel calmer in your presence. That's powerful, but power has a shadow, because often, therapist friends are better at holding space than taking up space. Think about it. When someone else is talking, you're fully there. You ask questions, you listen deeply, you don't interrupt. But when it's your turn, you might downplay your own struggles. You might wrap your pain in humor. You might think, it's not that big of a deal, even when it is. Why? Sometimes it's identity. You've internalized the role of the strong one. And if you're the strong one, who supports you? If you're the calm one, do you even get to fall apart? There's also something called emotional labor, originally used to describe workplace dynamics. It applies beautifully to friendships. Emotional labor is the invisible effort of managing feelings, yours and others. Validating, soothing, reframing, encouraging. It's work. Meaningful work, but still work. And if you're the therapist friend, you're often doing that labor for free, out of love, without even realizing how much energy it costs. Let me paint a picture. Your friend calls you after a breakup. You spend 2 hours helping them untangle red flags, reminding them of their worth, gently challenging their self-blame. You hang up feeling good that you helped but also drained. Then you scroll through your own unanswered messages, your own unresolved worries, and you think, I'll deal with that later. Later sometimes never comes. Now, here's where it gets deeper. Many therapist friends score high in traits like agreeableness and openness in personality psychology. You care. You're curious about human behavior. You genuinely want to understand why people do what they do. You probably watch videos like this because you're fascinated by the inner world. But there's another layer. Boundaries. If you're the therapist friend, you might struggle with saying no to emotional access. You feel guilty when someone says, I don't know what I'd do without you. That hits your heart. It feels meaningful. It feels like purpose. And it is meaningful. But purpose can quietly become pressure. Some therapist friends develop what's called a helper identity. Their self-worth becomes tied to being needed. If no one is coming to you with a crisis, you might even feel strangely irrelevant. It's subtle. You won't admit it out loud, but it's there. There's a concept in psychology called the Cartman drama triangle. It describes 3 roles people unconsciously slip into: victim, persecutor, and rescuer. The therapist friend often becomes the rescuer. You swoop in, you stabilize, you fix. And while you don't see yourself as superior, you do see yourself as responsible. But constantly rescuing can prevent others from learning to self-regulate, and it can prevent you from experiencing relationships where support flows both ways. Let me ask you something gently. When was the last time you fully unraveled in front of someone? Not polished vulnerability. Not, I've already processed this, and now I can present it neatly. I mean raw. Confused. Mid-breakdown. If that feels uncomfortable to imagine, that's telling. Sometimes therapist friends fear being too much. Ironically, the very thing others rely on you for, emotional depth, is the thing you hesitate to show. And yet, your depth is not just for others. It's yours. Now, Here's the empowering part. Being the therapist friend is not a flaw. It's a strength. You likely have high emotional intelligence. You can perspective shift. You understand nuance. You probably give incredible advice because you see patterns clearly. But strengths become sustainable only with balance. Imagine your empathy like a rechargeable battery. Every time you deeply hold space, a little bit drains. If you never plug it back in, through rest, through being heard, through setting boundaries, eventually it flickers. You don't have to stop being the safe one, but you do have to expand your role. You can say, I really want to be there for you, but can we talk tomorrow? I'm a bit overwhelmed tonight. That's not selfish. That's modeling healthy regulation. You can also experiment with letting conversations be messier when they're about you. Resist the urge to summarize your feelings neatly. Let yourself ramble. Let yourself not have the answers. It might feel unnatural at first, like you're stepping out of character, but maybe you're not stepping out of character. Maybe you're stepping into a fuller version of it. Because here's a reframe. You're not the therapist friend because you're invincible. You're the therapist friend because you understand pain. You understand confusion. You understand what it's like to need someone steady. And that means you deserve someone steady too. Think about how good it feels when someone truly listens to you. Not to respond, not to fix, just to understand. That's what you give people all the time. It's not greedy to want that back. It's human. And here's something beautiful. When you allow yourself to be supported, you actually deepen your relationships. You move from being the emotional service provider to being a whole person in connection. You stop being the group's unofficial counselor and start being a friend, equal, layered, imperfect. So if you're the therapist friend, I don't want you to shrink that part of yourself. The world needs emotionally intelligent people. It needs listeners. It needs calm in chaos. But I also want you to widen the lens. Your value isn't just in how well you hold others. It's in who you are when you're not holding anything at all. Maybe the next time someone says, "You're so strong," you smile and say, "Thanks, but I'm human too." And maybe tonight, instead of solving someone else's crisis, you check in with your own heart. What have you been carrying quietly? What have you postponed feeling? You don't have to answer perfectly, just honestly. If this felt a little too accurate, you're not alone. There are so many therapist friends out there, nodding quietly, realizing why they're always the safe one. Tell me in the comments, do you relate to this role? And if you do, what's one small way you can let yourself be supported this week? And if you want to keep exploring the psychology behind the roles we play, the masks we wear, and the patterns we don't always notice, consider subscribing. Because understanding your mind isn't about labeling yourself. It's about finally seeing yourself clearly. And you, therapist friend, deserve to be seen too. But here's the twist. People who replay conversations often have high social awareness. You notice tone shifts, subtle body language, emotional undercurrents. Not everyone does. Some people walk away from conversations and never think about them again. That doesn't mean they're more confident. Sometimes it just means they're less attuned. Your replay habit might actually be a sign of sensitivity and pattern recognition. The issue isn't that you reflect, it's that you over-personalize. There's a concept in social psychology called the spotlight effect. It describes how we dramatically overestimate how much other people notice us. You might be replaying that one awkward sentence, convinced it defined the entire interaction. Meanwhile, the other person is probably replaying something they said. Everyone thinks they're the main character in the social movie. In reality, most people are too busy analyzing themselves to analyze you. But when you're someone who replays conversations, it can feel like your brain is holding a private tribunal. Why did you say that? You should have been funnier. You sounded insecure. It's exhausting. And here's where neuroscience adds another layer. When you replay conversations, your brain activates similar neural pathways as if the event is happening again. That means your body can relive the embarrassment or anxiety. Your heart rate subtly shifts. Your muscles tense, even though you're just lying in bed. Your brain doesn't fully distinguish between memory and imagination. So what feels like harmless mental reviewing can turn into emotional re-experiencing. But let me ask you something gently. When you replay conversations, what are you actually looking for? Approval, certainty, control. Often, it's control. If you can analyze it enough, maybe you can prevent future rejection. Maybe you can script better responses. Maybe you can outsmart uncertainty. But human interaction isn't a math equation. It's jazz. Improvised, messy, alive. And here's something rarely talked about. Sometimes we replay conversations not because we did something wrong, but because the interaction mattered to us. Emotional significance increases mental replay. If you don't care, you don't review. So the very fact that you're replaying might mean you value connection deeply. That's not weakness. That's investment. There's also a subtle perfectionism thread here. Not the loud, achievement-driven kind. The quiet social perfectionism that whispers, You should always say the right thing. This belief creates impossible standards. Because conversations are co-created, they're shared responsibility. Yet your brain might act like you're responsible for the entire emotional outcome. You're not. Let's zoom out historically for a second. Philosophers like Socrates believed reflection was essential for growth. The unexamined life is not worth living. Reflection itself isn't the problem. It's when reflection turns into self-punishment. There's a difference between reviewing and rehearsing your own downfall. And here's where compassion matters. If you're someone who replays conversations, chances are you also care deeply about how you affect others. You don't want to hurt people. You don't want to be misunderstood. You don't want to seem arrogant or awkward. That's empathy. But empathy without boundaries turns inward. Instead of asking, "How did that land?" it becomes, "What's wrong with me?" See the shift. One question is growth-oriented. The other is identity-threatening. Research on anxiety shows that uncertainty is one of the biggest triggers for mental loops. Conversations are full of ambiguity. Did they mean that? Were they joking? Did I miss something? Your brain hates open loops, so it tries to close them by replaying the interaction. But some loops can't be closed, and maybe they don't need to be. There's also something comforting about replaying. It creates the illusion that you're still connected to the moment, especially if the interaction was meaningful or emotionally charged. Your mind revisits it like reading a favorite chapter, hoping to understand it more deeply. But understanding doesn't always come from replaying. Sometimes it comes from letting the moment breathe. If you find yourself replaying conversations often, try noticing the tone of your inner voice. Is it harsh? Is it curious? Is it investigative or accusatory? Because you can't always stop the replay instantly, but you can change the narrator. Instead of, "That was so stupid," what if it became, "Interesting. I was nervous there." Instead of, "They definitely think I'm weird," what if it shifted to, "I don't actually know what they're thinking." Small shifts, huge impact. And here's something freeing. Most conversations are forgettable. Not in a sad way, in a human way. Think about all the conversations you've had this year. How many do you remember in detail? Probably very few. That's likely true for others too. The moment you're dissecting might already be archived in someone else's mind. There's a quiet irony here. The people who replay conversations the most often want connection the most. You care about being understood, about being liked, about belonging. That desire is deeply human, but belonging doesn't come from perfect performance. It comes from authenticity, from showing up imperfectly and letting others respond. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let a conversation exist without autopsy. Let it be slightly awkward. Let it be unfinished. Let it be human. If this is you, you're not broken. Your brain is just very alert, very attuned, very invested. The goal isn't to silence it completely. It's to teach it that not every interaction is a survival test. You don't need to optimize every sentence you ever speak. You're allowed to be spontaneous. You're allowed to misphrase. You're allowed to exist without review. So tonight, if your brain starts replaying something from earlier, pause for a second. Ask yourself, am I learning something useful or am I punishing myself? That question alone creates awareness, and awareness softens the loop. If you relate to this, I'd love to know. Do you replay arguments more? Flirty conversations, work meetings. There's insight in the pattern. And if you're curious about why your mind works the way it does, stick around. Because understanding your brain doesn't just quiet anxiety, it builds self-trust. And when you trust yourself, conversations stop feeling like tests. They start feeling like life. Have you ever noticed that in almost every group chat, there's that one person everyone turns to when things fall apart? The one who gets the late night, "Can I vent?" text. The one who somehow ends up sitting on the edge of a friend's bed at 1 a.m., nodding gently while someone unpacks their heartbreak for the third time this month. The one who says, "I get it," and actually means it. And if you're watching this, there's a decent chance that person is you. You're the therapist friend. Have you ever walked away from a conversation and then had it again and again and again? You're brushing your teeth and suddenly you're back in that moment. You're in the shower, replaying the exact tone you used when you said, "Yeah, that makes sense." You're lying in bed and your brain decides now is the perfect time to replay that joke that didn't land 3 years ago. Most people assume this means you're awkward, or anxious, or socially bad at life. But what if that's not the full story? What if your brain isn't trying to embarrass you but protect you? Let's slow this down. Imagine you're leaving a cafe after meeting someone new. The conversation was fine, nothing dramatic. But the second you step outside, your brain hits rewind. Did I talk too much? Was that comment weird? Why did they pause before responding? Suddenly your mind turns into a film editor, cutting, zooming, analyzing micro expressions like you're reviewing security footage. It feels automatic. Because it is. Your brain is a prediction machine. At its core, it's constantly asking one question: how do I stay safe? Thousands of years ago, social safety meant survival. If the tribe rejected you, that wasn't just embarrassing, it was dangerous. So your brain evolved to scan social interactions for mistakes. Not because it hates you, because it loves you. Replaying conversations is often your brain's attempt at social error correction. It's like your mind saying, let's review the tape. We can improve next time. In psychology, this overlaps with something called rumination. But here's where it gets interesting. Not all rumination is created equal. There's destructive rumination, where you spiral into self-criticism. And then there's reflective processing, where your brain is genuinely trying to learn patterns. The problem is that your brain doesn't always know when to stop. It's like opening 10 tabs in your browser and forgetting how to close them. You might notice the replay isn't neutral. It often zooms in on the most emotionally charged moments. That slightly awkward silence. That facial expression you couldn't read. That sentence you wish you'd phrased better. This happens because of something called the negativity bias. Your brain gives more weight to potential threats than neutral or positive moments. If 10 things went fine and one thing felt off, guess which one your mind replays at 1 a.m. exactly?